We are hearing from a range of voices on the programme today, from both the Palestinian perspective and the Israeli perspective. We'll continue to do that between now and 1 p.m. We'll continue to do that throughout the day as we cover the conflict. Richard Pater is in Jerusalem. He's the director of BICOM, which is a British-Israeli communication and research centre. Richard Pater, hello.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on.
The response from Israel, what do you make of this, and what do you expect to see in the coming days?
So first of all, I'd say Israel's society in broad terms, I think, is still in shock. This is the most significant attack, certainly the one-day attack in Israel's history. And there is a lot of anger, a lot of concern over the failings, primarily intelligence, operational and tactical. But I think that all comes at a later stage in which Israel will vigorously investigate itself. I think it's now, as of this morning, there were still pockets of terrorism within Israeli communities, civilian communities, which the IDF were engaging with. My understanding now is that finally they've engaged and neutralized all of those threats, but one can't be sure that there are still not any cells remaining in the country. So I think that's the first stage. And in parallel, the rockets are still incoming. I'm here in Jerusalem. We had a siren here about an hour ago, and I heard the thumps in the relative distance. And of course, in parallel, the attacks by the Israeli Air Force are ongoing into Gaza right now, targeting the Hamas infrastructure, military infrastructure.
Do people not in the north of the country feel safe?
Well, this is happening in the south. The north has a separate issue where there is the threat of Hezbollah. We've seen reports over yesterday and today of Hezbollah forces gathering on the border across the line of the border in southern Lebanon. There is a real concern that in the north, the threat of Hezbollah pales in comparison the threat of Hamas, because Hezbollah has such a large, bigger ammunition and
so in terms of taking
capacity.
advantage, in terms of Hezbollah taking advantage of the unrest and the focus on Hamas at this moment in time.
Yeah, that's a real concern. Israel has passed on messages through the international community warning them that it will be, to open up a second front would also be incredibly difficult. But I think the doctrine of the army is built as such that they are prepared for that eventuality. But obviously we hope that subsides and that doesn't come to pass. How do you
expect Israel to react to the hostages or to the people that have been kidnapped, I should say, by Hamas?
So this is a very sensitive point. 2014, the war then began after 3 Israelis were captured and kidnapped. In the last 10 years, Hamas has held on to 2 Israeli civilians and the bodies of 2 IDF soldiers that fell in 2014. And again, all of this pales in comparison to 130 odd plus that we understand are now in captivity. I think there will be efforts. There are suggestions that Israel, as Hamas has changed the rules of the game by this attack, and Israel is similarly responding accordingly. In the short term, at least, they've stopped the supply of humanitarian aid into Gaza as part of a factor that maybe that can be part of. By turning that back on, they can arrange a transfer, a release of at least the women and the children and the elderly that are being held in captivity by Hamas. But listen, the international community, it was actually former British Prime Minister Tony Blair that set the criteria in which the terms to talk with Hamas, and he set three lines. 1, they need to stop terrorism. Secondly, they need to recognize Israel. And thirdly, they need to honor previous agreements that have been signed between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. Those conditions aren't anywhere clearer to be met. What this week has proven us is that, unlike in the past, where Israel tried to offer economic incentives to Hamas in order to govern, what's happened instead is that they have been further radicalized and brought into the wing of radical Islamic terrorism, led by Iran first and foremost.
You've mentioned Iran. I was going to bring in Iran now. I've put this question to many of the people we've spoken to. I just wonder if briefly you could tell me where you hope the negotiation, where you hope the brokerage of peace perhaps, or at least some resolution, where that lies internationally.
I think it's very difficult right now. I don't see any chance. I mean, I think the most important figure in the past who has been kind of the most important figure in terms of negotiating and reaching a ceasefire has actually been the Egyptian government, that have shared concerns with Israel in terms of the Sinai Peninsula. Also, don't forget that Gaza is closed off on three sides by Israel, but Egypt also controls one of the borders and uses that as a pressure valve in terms of letting goods in and people crossing as well. So I think the Egyptian mediation, although I think I understand they're in Gaza already, it hasn't really started in earnest. We're still too close to the event, and Israel militarily feels the need to respond and try and send, at least restore deterrence and send a message to Hamas at this point.
Richard Pater, Director of BICOM, thank you very much.